Hey guys, welcome back to the Be Better podcast, episode 38, with a dear friend of ours, Laurie Obrien. Wanted to kind of throw this out there really quick, guys. I know we've taken about a 2 month break. Life has just got absolutely crazy between Matt and I. So we hope to get a little more consistent with giving you guys good content and meeting with awesome people. The reason why we wanted to start this back, obviously, tonight is the special guest that we have on. You guys are going to hear more of her story here in a little bit, but I just want you guys to be aware that this is something that's near and dear to both Matt and mine's heart. With multiple people we know personally have been affected by fentanyl, and as well as obviously Laurie, and the story she's going to tell has been directly affected worse than we can even imagine. So, without further ado, Laurie, please just jump right in and tell us everything.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Um, First of all, I appreciate that you wanted to speak with me and let me talk about my son because I think as a parent who has lost a son or a daughter, one of our biggest fears is that our children will be forgotten. And so by talking and telling our stories and reaching out to other families, to other parents, in a sense, it's a way that we can keep our kids alive. Um, my son Mitch was a really great kid. He was one of three. We have three sons. Mitch was the middle son. Um, his life, in my opinion, was a pretty stable life. Went to Lutheran schools from kindergarten through eighth grade. Then he went to Lindbergh High School for freshman year through senior year. He did the A+ scholarship program, which basically you tutored kids. You had a pretty good attendance record, kept a decent grade point. I think it was a B average. It says A+, but it wasn't A+. I think it was B average. There were certain criteria that you had to meet, and all three of my sons, met those criteria. So you get to go to a junior college for free for 2 years if you did the A+ program. My husband and I, we've been married for 38 years, so our boys had a real stable home. I guess you would look at our family and you probably wouldn't think that we would have a son who died, from an overdose. That is, there's so much misconceptions of what someone who struggles with alcohol and drugs looks like or what type of family they come from. And I think ours was a pretty stable, loving home, which brings me to the point that many people that I meet along the way whose sons and daughters have died, they've come from stable, loving homes. So all the stigma and all the things that you hear about, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there's a lot of kids that came from really great homes who struggle with substance use disorder. So Mitch and his brothers, they become frequent, invited frequently to high school parties, partying a lot, drinking a lot, smoking weed. And we start grounding them, taking cars, taking cell phones. I really thought that I could ground my sons into better behaviors. And sadly, that really wasn't the case. Mitch continues to make poor choices, drink, smoke weed, pop pills, starting to get DUIs now. This would be after high school. He gets his first DUI. Then he gets a second DUI. Well, after the second one, we are not going to give him another car because we don't feel that that's a good idea for him to be driving around intoxicated or under the influence. Um, so he's having a lot of consequences, and yet he is not changing. He's not getting better. He's not making any differences in his behavior. And what I soon learned from going to open AA meetings and NA meetings and trying to understand what our family's up against is that, maybe Mitch has what I consider the disease of addiction. A lot of young people, they drink, they experiment, they smoke weed, pop pills, do things that young people do, and then they go on to live their lives, have their families, they grow up, they grow out of it. But Mitch, he can't seem to shake it. He can't seem to outgrow it and change. So around this time, of course, fentanyl comes onto the scene. So he's been using alcohol, weed, benzos, Xanax, and then Oxycontin, which are prescription opioids, very addictive. And you can't get those any longer. You can't get the prescription pills. They're too costly. So he switches to what would be considered street heroin, which is synthetic fentanyl. Heroin was not in his toxicology at time of death, because a lot of people think that heroin's on the streets, and heroin is not on the streets. It's synthetic fentanyl, and it's much more deadly than heroin. It's much more deadly than Oxycontin. So Mitch goes on lots of treatment centers. We get him into different programs, sober living. we send him away from St. Louis, he always figures out a way back. He always, tells everybody that he's clean and sober and he's ready to, live a healthy lifestyle. And then he gets back to St. Louis and he goes back to his old people places and things. And he, sadly goes back to that partying lifestyle. At the time of Mitch's death, he was 30 years old. He had a great job at Bussin. He had a beautiful home in Oakville, a brick home, lovely home. He just had everything going for him. He was bright. He was funny. He was articulate. Everybody loved him. Teachers loved him. Parents loved him. Friends loved him. He was a great kid. And I don't want his alcoholism and his substance use disorder to define who he was. I feel like sadly he couldn't embrace recovery in a meaningful way that would save his life. And then when synthetic fentanyl came onto the streets of St. Louis, it was just a matter of time. You can only take those type of substances so long before it's going to end your life. It's going to end your respirations. You're going to stop breathing, and there won't be anyone with Narcan. There won't be anyone to call 911 to save you. And that's what happened to our son. He had come home from work on a Friday. He danced out of the offices at Bussin, telling them that he was going to party all weekend. He tried to get several friends to come over and party with him, but they were busy because now at 30, you're becoming more of an adult. A lot of people have families, marriages, children. And so he drank, used pills, smoked weed, and then he finished it off with synthetic fentanyl, which was the last substance he put into his body. And that was what was probably the final cause of his respirations shutting down. So my husband, I didn't get a hold of him that particular weekend. And typically he would text my husband back. He didn't always text me back because he would get angry with me when I would call him out and say I thought he was doing things he shouldn't be doing. So, but he would text his dad back and he didn't. So we went over to his house on a Sunday evening. Dan used his key. My husband used his key to get into Mitch's house, and Mitch was dead in the master bedroom, his bedroom. And I believe he probably died Friday night, but we do not find him till Thursday night. So that was a quick summary of Mitch and his journey through substance use disorder. I think that if I had another chance, I would love to send him away to another treatment center, another sober living environment. I do think that we were blessed in the fact that Mitch struggled for many years and he got lots of treatment centers and lots of sober living environments and away from St. Louis. So would I love another chance at trying to help him get recovery and embrace recovery? Absolutely. But I don't sit and think, wow, we never got to get him help. We never got to get him in detox and treatment centers and sober living. We were lucky. We got him into a lot of places throughout his lifetime. And sadly, it didn't work and he ended up passing away. But I feel for the parents whose kids are at a party and they take what they think is a Xanax or a Oxycontin or whatever pill they think they're taking. And it's really pressed fentanyl and it ends their life. And their parents, have never don't even realize that their son or daughter is experimenting or trying things. And I know that I was lucky and we were lucky that we got so many opportunities to help Mitch to get him in treatment centers. And sadly, it didn't work, but, we helped him get to age 30 anyway. So that is my life in a nutshell. Would you guys like to ask some questions or?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack there, and I mean, I have 1,000 questions, but I'll try to keep it as as simple as possible. I mean, and I just want to kind of say, from the bottom of my heart, I'm sure Matt feels the same way. Like, I hope you guys don't feel like you're failures for what happened because you're not. I mean, I've had many friends unfortunately pass away through overdoses, and it's really my generation and your son's generations. We're the ones who are dying from this primarily, and I think the statistic is 18 to 38. It's the number one killer in America, which
Yep.
is it's really, really, really sad. But I've also had other people that on both sides of it, right? Their parents gave them every opportunity and sent them away to very expensive rehab and treatment centers that they come back for a little bit, but then they hang around with the same people, right? And
Yep. Yep.
unfortunately, it ended up in the same result. And then I've had friends, families that did not help them at all, and those people just had to bootstrap it, and they go out and get clean, and it works. Or sometimes it doesn't work, and they unfortunately end up in the same spot. So my first question to you, Laurie, is where do you think where do you think this came from? Not fentanyl, but like where do you think the use that Mitch was having, where do you think that came from, and like when do you think it started?
I really think it started when he was attending high school parties. And I just think as a young person, you really don't think the first time you drink alcohol, smoke weed, pop a pill, you have no idea that, you know, it may haunt you until you die at 30. You know, you're young, you're experimenting, you're having fun, you're being foolish. You don't think anything bad's going to happen. And sadly, I believe Purdue Pharma, when they started pushing Oxycontin to the doctors and it became so prevalent and everybody had it in their medicine cabinet. And then people started talking on the internet and saying, hey, you could take this stuff and get high and mix some alcohol with it. And I believe that they, in a sense, created a very problematic situation. And then you have young people who are using that and they become addicted, that they can't get those prescription pills anymore. So now they're addicted. It's not just fun any longer. And they're trying to use the street equivalent, which in this case would be synthetic fentanyl. I just think it was a perfect storm of a lot of things that, you know, had he never tried Oxycontin, had he never used Xanax, would he still have problems with alcohol and weed? I would imagine he would. I think he's that predisposition, someone who, you know, would always struggle with substances in a way that other people can experiment and do silly things when they're young and they just outgrow it. But I truly blame Purdue Pharma for a lot of the problems our country has today. Because I think it all started with the pharmaceutical companies. I really do.
I would agree with that 110%. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of big pharma. God bless. I don't even take Advil or Tylenol. I mean, I had a wisdom tooth out last week, and it was the first time I've taken a prescription drug, or not prescription, but a over the counter drug, which was a Tylenol. Right? I took a Tylenol a couple times. Right? So I'm a big advocate of anti big pharma. I think that's all they're in is for the profit, and they don't really care who dies. And then the people that are a victim of it, they can't be sued over it. Right? So they're literally they have the free power to do whatever they like, and it doesn't matter how many people are benefited or hurt from it, right? They I mean, they're not going to face any consequences. Um, I would agree. I mean, 100% as well. I think, as a high school kid, I was in high school 10 years ago. I graduated in 14, right? So Matt was a couple years behind me, or excuse me, ahead of me there. But I do think you're right. Like whenever you're young, you're exposed to do these different things, right? And you're exposed to these different substances, and you're not thinking long term, right? You're not thinking, oh, will I get addicted from this? You're not thinking, oh, like what's the long term outcome from this? Like, can this hurt me? Can this kill me? But I will say, 10 years ago, the amount of fentanyl, that was out there was very minimal compared to now, right? So,
True, true.
back in the day, I mean, and God bless, I lived in Eureka, right? So like I mean, there was marijuana at parties and there was alcohol at parties, but it was very rarely that somebody brought a random drug. But in the events that somebody would bring a random drug, it would be something that you've heard of before, and there'd be no doubt in your mind that it would be legit, right?
Right,
Uh,
right.
if somebody brought just for example, this never happened, but let's say somebody brought a pill, like a pain pill or something, right, to take, right? Back in those days, if somebody told me, hey, this is a Percocet, if you take this, it'll make you feel weird, and somebody took it, there was no concern that, oh my God, this might be laced with fentanyl. This might be the last pill I ever take, right? Nowadays,
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like, the kids, unfortunately, and younger people, if you even go out there and experiment with drugs, you have a good chance of
Of
that
dying.
being your
Yeah.
last night.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the drug dealers are getting smart and they're pressing fentanyl into a Xanax pill or into a Percocet or, something that looks like what you'd get from the pharmacy. And
Right.
really you're just getting the pressed, it's all fentanyl and that's death. That equals death. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really an epidemic that I don't think our country's truly aware of, like what's going on, and I truly don't believe that maybe. I mean, we've all had somebody we know that's affected or passed away from it, but I just truly don't believe as a nation we take the problem seriously because, I mean, look how many people are dying from it. Look how many people are are affected by it, even if they don't pass away from it, right? Like their lives are completely altered because now they're dependent on a substance that is killing them and will kill them eventually. I mean, it's a guarantee, right?
Yep.
Um,
Exactly.
I
And
mean,
you
it's the
it
same
affects the parents
concept as
too. I
playing
mean, not
Russian
just the
roulette.
family.
Oh, sorry, Matt. Go ahead. I talked over you.
No, you're good. I say not only affects the person who's taking it, but it also, affects the family and the friends. It takes over the entire community eventually.
It really does. We call it the family disease. One person may be struggling, but we all get to play along because it just hurts everybody. You're so concerned, you're so worried, you're so, trying to get them to realize that this is a huge problem. It's going to take their life, and then they're frustrated at you because you keep trying to get them to go see a therapist. I feel like there are a lot of tools that can be used as far as getting healthy, and I hate to say clean and sober are clean, because I don't think people that have substance use disturbances, I don't think that they are dirty people, but they need to get healthy. They need to embrace themselves in the recovery community. They need to use MATs. If they have to take Suboxone, or if they have to take antidepressants, or whatever they need to take so that they can live a healthy life and give up those substances, that's what needs to be done. And I think being part of the recovery community and talking to other people that struggle with alcohol and substances, no one understands. I understand parents who have lost their sons and daughters. I understand parents whose kids are still struggling with alcohol and drugs. But I mean, I've never had an alcohol and drug problem myself. So I wanted Mitch to go to those meetings and connect with those people. I don't care if it's Celebrate Recovery, or Dharma Recovery, or Smart Recovery, or AA, or NA. Just let's try everything. Let's get some good recovery people in your life. And sadly, he really, people told me, oh, he tried so hard. I think he tried for me because he loved me so much, and he loved his dad and his brothers. But did he really want to be sober in a way that would have saved his life? I'm not so sure. But then again, that's the mental and the physical control that these type of substances have over you, that maybe you think in your head you really can't give it up. You also need mental help. You need to talk to a therapist. You need to talk to someone who understands how powerful these drugs can be. And I don't think the continuum of care is very good. I think the insurance companies are very disappointing in what they will allow or pay for. A man told me early on, when Mitch wasn't doing well, he said, whatever you do, use your insurance as long as you can. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, he will age out of your insurance at 26. And then you may have to pay cash out of your pocket to get him help. And I said, oh my goodness, he's not going to go till 26. I mean, surely we'll get a handle on this beforehand. And he's like, hopefully you will, but just in case, use your insurance as long as you can. Don't pay cash for things just yet. And sadly, that did come to pass. He did age out of our insurance. We did have to start coming up with cash for things. And if you had told me that earlier, like when he was 18, 17, I would have never believed it would have gone on so long. Not happy with the insurance companies, not happy with the continuum of care. We need to address mental illness in this country. I believe Mitch started off a healthy young man, but because of alcohol and drug use, I think he damaged his forming brain. And I think he was severely mentally ill at the end of his life, or he would have not kept using those substances.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would I would agree with you 100%. I just don't think we have the infrastructure to handle a problem like this, and it's unfortunate, and it drives me crazy that there's not much more support systems out there. I mean, there's rehabs and clinics and everything, that's great, but I've always been a firm believer that you can't save somebody that doesn't want to be saved, right? And
I totally agree.
that individual
yeah.
might put in the effort, front facing, right? But I mean, I don't know if they're just in the mindset of, hey, I could keep doing this and keep getting high forever, and it is what it is. Then what are you supposed to do? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, it's an inevitability that fentanyl will kill you, right? Your substance abuse will kill you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? Like,
Absolutely.
it's not
Yes.
like a slow burn like alcohol, right? Somebody could drink for 35 years and then die of liver failure, right? That's not how it works, right? Nobody has been doing fentanyl for 30 years and lived to tell the tale. Nobody's done fentanyl for 10 years and lived to tell the tale.
True. Very
It's
true.
but do
it's
these
a quick
people, I mean, do they know that though? Do you think they're properly educated on the effects of long-term of fentanyl or other drugs that, and the statistics of, you know, age to deaths, right? The mortality of that. I mean, do you think that's an issue about giving the proper education to the kids, people, or general population? What's your thoughts on that?
I believe that in Mitch's case, I think he knew just because of so many people that he had gone to treatment with or been in sober living with. I mean, so many of those poor men passed away one by one, passing away. So I think he knew that, it was deadly, but I think he was so mentally ill, he thought it's never going to happen to me. He would say, I know how much to use. I am not going to overdose. I'm not going to stop breathing. You can stop worrying. I'm never going to be sober the way you want. I'm always going to be a little drunk and a little high, a little faded. And I would laugh and I'd say, Mitch, you're never a little anything. You're balls to the wall. Like you won't stop once you start. You're not someone who can drink a little or smoke a little or, and he would say, no, you don't know what you're talking about, mom. You're just a mom. You're just concerned and worried. I know how much to take. So I do think there's that mental illness part that they truly believe they're not going to die. It's not going to happen to them. And sadly, of course it's going to happen. So I think we need more mental health in this country. We need more psychiatric nurse practitioners, more psychiatrists, more I think it's getting better. I know there are programs now that if you don't have a job and you've, been in prison and you're in between trying to, obviously you're not insured, there are government programs that will pay for you to go somewhere, talk to someone, get some Boxone, get a Vivitrol shot. I think Mitch died at 30. He would be 36 if he was alive today. I think it is getting better. I think they're trying, but still far too much death. Far too much death.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And it's super unfortunate that we even have to have this conversation, but I think I've been playing with this idea in my head for a long time, right? So like my ambition is to eventually trickle to somewhere into a political position where I can directly make some impacts and hopefully for the right reasons, right? And obviously for the right way to get a solution. But the problems that I face here is how do we combat this at the source, right? I think our country has a huge mental health epidemic. I mean, there's not even a question, right?
Oh my
But
gosh.
I mean,
Yes.
everybody's mentally ill, okay, but I mean, at the same time, everybody does have that mentality, like you said, Mitch has, right? Where, oh, this could never happen to me. Everybody thinks that until it does, right? I mean, you hear it all the time. This is an old horse I'm going to beat, but back in the day, and even now, they educate on drinking and driving. It's the same idea, right? People used
Yes.
to drink and drive all the time, and they'd be like, oh, this will never happen to me. This will never happen to me. And then what happens? They get into an accident because they're irresponsible, they're drinking, and they kill a family of four, and then they're injured, and maybe their buddy in the passenger seat dies too. Like, I mean, it's easy to say, oh, this won't happen to me until it happens to you. And in regards to usage, I hope anybody that's out there listens to this because this is probably the most important thing I'm going to say tonight. This is Laurie's platform, but I just want to throw this little tidbit because I know this for a fact. So I was able to go and attain a spot to see this DEA agent from California um, give this presentation on fentanyl. And it was one of the most eye opening things I've ever listened to. It's 4 hours long. The presentation was 4 hours long. So we sat there and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. Normally, I can't pay attention for 25 minutes. So this guy was talking about, all of his experiences. And what he told us was like, people that say the excuse, oh, I know how much I'm taking. With fentanyl, it's bullshit. There's no
Right.
way to
Yeah.
know because let's say
Yes.
you have a pill, right? That's the size of a Tylenol. Okay. Well, I know a 5 milligram Tylenol, if I cut that into pieces, right? Let's say I cut it into 5 pieces, each little equal piece will be 1 milligram, right? However, you can't do that with fentanyl because it's illegally pressed. So one side could be X amount and the other side could be nothing. It could be the filler, right? So
Absolutely.
that's where the big concern is like, oh, I'm only going to do half or do a quarter or whatever the kids, I don't even know the measurements, but whatever people are doing, unfortunately, that could be enough, right? That could be enough to kill you. So I don't know where the real solution is here. I'm actually going to ask you that here in a minute. I wanted to get your feedback and take on it, but I think the real thing is two pronged, right? One, we have to educate people, and I'm not saying scare them like they did with the Dare program and drugs are bad. I think kids are going to be experimenting with things, but I do think that Narcan needs to be readily available, and I think Narcan needs to be cheaper. It's $43 roughly a box now. I hate to say like I'm condoning drug usage because I'm not, but I mean I do think that every house in America should have one thing of Narcan just in case that situation comes about, right? Where
Absolutely.
their kids is influenced by a bad person, they take something at home thinking it's just gonna mess them up a little bit, and then you find them dead, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But I wanted to get your take. So I I know this is kind of a loaded question, so just give me whatever you're thinking. If you could solve this problem, how do you think it'd be done?
It's funny. I have friends who have sons that are still alive, so we're trying to brainstorm and try to help them keep their kids alive. And then I have friends, obviously, whose sons and daughters are dead. And we always try to lift each other up and try to, help other parents who are just now losing their sons and daughters. And, I always think if I had a time machine and I could go back in that time machine, what would I do differently? What would I do differently? And I keep thinking, man, I don't know if I would do anything differently because I really thought my life was really good. I had a life that other people would like to have, and a good husband and a beautiful house and healthy boys. And I just I wish I had the answers, and I wish I could say definitively this would help. But one of the things I would like to do moving forward to help people is I think they always say they don't have enough funding at schools. I know plenty of parents whose kids are dead that would love to come and talk at the schools and at each grade level. Let's start young. Let's talk about the dangers of alcohol and drug use starting in kindergarten. Now, perhaps we have to use different language for kindergartners versus a 10th grader. But I think, the DARE program's wonderful and I believe in it. But we kind of need to have people every year coming in and talking about things. Doesn't mean kids aren't going to experiment. Doesn't mean people aren't going to still, make those choices when they become teenagers. But I just think the more education, the more talking about it, the more access they have at schools and seeing parents whose kids are dead. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do crazy things when they're young. That's part of being young, being experimental, doing silly stuff. But, maybe they'll think about that dad who lost his daughter or that mom who lost her son. I definitely think, the insurance companies, I think they need to be held accountable. There's so often when they don't authorize something and then someone goes out and, they're about to go to treatment. You have a small window to get somebody into treatment and they get denied. They're not going to let them go in. They go use, they're dead. It's like we need to meet people where they're at. If they're ready to go to treatment, we need to have a bed for them. We need to find a place for them to go. Um, I think that the pharmaceutical companies, I detest the pharmaceutical companies. I just have to be honest about that. I kind of feel like they should have to pay for the Narcan for everyone. They should have to pay for the Suboxone or the Vivitrol shots for those who can't afford it. I just feel like they're so evil. And I'd like to, and they actually have lost a lot of money in lawsuits. A lot of stuff has been paid out, and that's what these programs are, that where they are giving the free Narcan and giving the free Vivitrol. So they have had some accountability, but I would like to see them have more accountability and have to pay out more money. Um, but what are the answers? Honestly, guys, I don't have the answers. You've got to love people. You've got to tell them that you believe they could get healthy. Nobody wants to be stigmatized and shamed. Nobody wants to be told that they're a piece of shit and that their life doesn't matter. And why don't you go overdose and die? We have to be kinder. We have to be loving. Doesn't mean they're going to live. Doesn't mean it's going to save anyone. But I always tell parents, if your son or daughter is doing these things that could bring about their death, the last conversation you have with them, you want to tell them you love them. You want to tell them, if you're a religious person, tell them you're praying for them. Tell them you love them. Tell them that you believe that they can get healthy and they can get well, because you don't want the last conversation you have with them to be something ugly where you're cussing and screaming and losing your mind, because then you have to live the rest of your life with those memories. So I
Let me
wish
ask
I
you. Let me ask
could.
you a question.
Yes.
I don't know if this is the answer, so I'm not advocating for this, but I'm just trying to, shoot from the hip here and think off the cuff. So let's say we're going back in time. Let's say Mitch is 16, okay? And don't. I'm not trying to be rude and use your son as an example, but let's just say
No.
you have a kid that's 16 years old, right? And you've been educating him. Well, this is in the future, right? So maybe I just had a daughter that was born, and Matt has two young daughters. So maybe this would be something that our generation would implement. But you have a child that's 16, right? You've been educating them as you're talking about throughout their whole life. Like, hey, listen, like we understand that teens will be teens, young adults will be young adults. You're going to make stupid decisions. You're going to want to experiment. You're going to want to figure it out for your own. That's just part of being human, right?
Absolutely.
But,
Yeah.
they're educated and they know the risk that can come with these drugs and things, right? If a 16-year-old that let's say you were the parent, came up to you and said, hey, I want to experiment with these drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, would you be comfortable if I did it in the house and under your supervision? What would you think your answer would be?
And it's funny you asked me that, because when my sons were growing up, there were parents who would let them drink, at their homes, because they were like, we're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to let them. And now that weed is legal, it's legal like alcohol.
Right.
Theoretically, you could let them smoke weed and drink alcohol at your house, supervise it. I never felt comfortable letting our kids do that, because we had alcoholism in our family. And I just thought, man, if they become alcoholics, I will really feel guilty. Like I would rather them wait till they were older to drink, than that. But I mean, I see the school, I see the thought process that if you let them try it at home and you can supervise them, I can kind of see both sides. I really can.
Yeah, because you don't want to advocate or promote it, right? Like the last thing if you give a, and you know this, and I know this because I was a kid not too long ago, and I know how I treated my family, right? You give a kid an inch, he's going to take a mile, right?
Right,
So
right,
let's say you say, hey, you know what? I'm okay with you and two buddies coming over here to have a couple beers and watch the football game, right? Or whatever, okay? Well, then what happens, right? Every weekend, you got a bunch of kids over and they're all getting hammered. That's the last thing you want because one, you're liable. Anything happens, you go to bed, they sneak out at 2 a.m., get in a car crash, you're liable, right?
right,
So,
right.
there's a huge liability aspect there. And obviously it's just not safe. But I've been playing on the fence with that as well. I had some buddies that I was friends with that, my family would never allow that in our house, but I could go to their house on the weekends and their parents didn't care. And, we were never doing anything crazy. Just if we wanted to, I don't know, drink a couple beers or whatever, right? Drink at their house. The rule was that we give them our car keys, and we don't leave until the morning.
Right.
And we were very respectful of the rule. Nobody ever broke it. So we'd give them car keys. We would drink whatever provisions we had and then, sleep there and then whatever. But I just don't know if that's necessarily the correct answer of you want to have that relationship with children to be comfortable to have these conversations with you. But at the same time, if you give in to them once, the last thing you want to do is have your son or daughter doing hardcore drugs or even hardcore drinking every weekend at the house.
Right, right. And I have friends who's let their kids drink and they are very much alive today. And Mitch and his brothers, we said no. And Mitch is dead, and our oldest son, who was only a year older than Mitch, he struggled with alcoholism terribly, and he is 37 today. He got sober 6 years ago. He's 6 years sobriety. Very proud of him, very thankful that we didn't lose him also from, drinking and just cirrhosis of the liver. Or I'm just so thankful. He has 3 children and a beautiful life, and I'm grateful. I don't know why our family was so, I don't know, attracted to substance use disorder or alcoholism, or, if I'm sure there's a genetic component. I'm sure of that. Um,
100%.
yeah. And you just don't know, but my friends, the ones who did let their kids drink, they are not alcoholics and they're very much alive. So, I can see both sides of the fence. I really can.
Yeah, and I don't think there's true. I mean, there's definitely a genetic aspect of it because I've done a lot of research. I know you have as well, but there's definitely a genetic component. But I think sometimes it's just the luck of the draw of who your kids get influenced by. For example, like my parents are, my family directly, there's addiction in my family very deep, very, very deep. And God bless, I don't even drink. I don't do anything. Like I said earlier, I don't even take a Tylenol, right? So like in this case, maybe the problem skipped a generation or two, whatever. But a lot of the times, if the parents or the grandparents or the cousin or the uncle or somebody directly influencing them is a substance abuser, then they're going to have the same issues, right? I mean, that's just, or on the other side of it, I mean, there's just so many ways they can tackle it. You could have and I've seen this happen, unfortunately, because this is what happened to my buddy. Great kid, playing sports, sharp as a tack, funny, like a good looking guy. Always had a girlfriend, was always doing well, always did well, and everything the kid ever did, right?
Yep.
For some reason started hanging around some piece of shit and started hanging around people that he shouldn't have been, got mixed up with people, went to jail a bunch of times, got arrested for dumb things, and then finally, unfortunately, fentanyl took his life. And he was, I mean, if you could write this kid's life in a book, I mean, he was just destined to be perfect and successful. And it's not any fault of his own. He was just influenced by people that had nothing but bad intentions for him, that wanted to do drugs. And unfortunately, he was the victim of it. And guess what? Those other people are still around. So that's how it works. I mean, there's no common denominator, but I do agree with your approach of the education early on. I think that's the only defense we have, right? Is just people being aware of what can happen and what will happen.
Well, and I think too that a lot of young people, if you don't know how to manage your feelings, then you think, well, I could take a pill or I could take some alcohol, or, maybe if we say, let's talk more about your feelings. What are you feeling? Are you anxious? Do you feel embarrassed? We don't have to turn to substances. We can go talk to a therapist. We can go talk to the school counselor. You know, we just have to find other ways to deal besides substances. But I'm not saying I'm against you taking an antidepressant. Are you taking something that would help your brain chemicals? I believe in MATs. I believe in medical assisted therapies and treatments, but I don't believe in self-medicating. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. No self-medicating.
I would agree with that. I mean, big time,
Yeah.
because it's never the solution, right? I mean, if you're upset about anything, it could be a small issue, a big issue, and you always hear the common term, "Oh, I need to have a drink," right? I'm stressed out. I need to have a drink. I've had a
Yeah,
long
a
day. I need to have
glass
a
of
drink.
wine. I need some wine. It's like, no, you really
Yeah,
don't. No, you.
like that's the worst thing you can do, right? Because you're not causing the problem
Yeah.
to go away. You're not solving it. You're putting a band-aid on a bullet hole, and it just spirals into worse things because now you're just training your body to think, "Oh, anytime that I get, upset, I can just use this and it gives me temporary relief." But in the reality, you're destroying yourself long term.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I have a question. So if with everything being said and everything you learned, what would you tell another set of parents who are potentially struggling through this with their child substance abuse? What would you say to them? What would advice you would give?
I've had lots of parents in my life whose kids are still alive from the different parent groups I've been involved with. I would say, you didn't cause it. You can't control it. You can't cure it. You can set healthy boundaries. You can tell them that you love them, that you believe that they can get healthy. We can find some treatment centers away from St. Louis. It seems to me like a lot of people that have been successful, they left the state. They go to treatment centers in other states. They do sober living, follow up sober living. It doesn't mean they can never come back, but they spend some time away from their people, places, and things, working on themselves. And it just seems like we have better success stories from those folks than the people that continue to spin their wheels and do things, in their home state. So I would always encourage them to try to get them some help somewhere other than St. Louis. And, and call me if you need to talk, if you need a shoulder to cry on. You're not alone. I think so often parents, we feel so much shame and so much stigma, and we do blame ourselves. We do think somehow this is our fault. And, people do judge us. I think it's better than it used to be. When Mitch dies, I have to say the world was pretty kind to us. And, very much like 1,000 people came to his funeral and brought us, food and cards and gifts and treated us very well. But there was one, and it's funny, I would remember her of all people, but it was a Lutheran mom. My sons went to Lutheran schools for the first 9 years of their life. And she says something on Facebook like, well, my kids went to school with the O'Briens, but we really didn't know them very well. And, so you're going to talk about this family who has, drug problems, but you're going to distance yourself from them like you didn't know them really well, and I just, it was just so awful. And I thought, listen, if you don't know us, why are you even talking about us? But anyway, with that one Lutheran mom that was wretched and awful, I have to say the rest of the people, everybody was very kind to us. We were treated well, and sent a lot of love and kindness, and I need to be thankful for that. But I don't think that's everybody's story and everybody's family, and so I always try to make them feel like loved and you're not alone and I'm here for you, and what can I do to make your journey less painful, because it's a painful road, especially when they continue to return to use. That's very difficult. While they're away, while they're doing well, you're so happy. And then when they do that return to use, you're devastated. It like takes your breath away, it takes your hope out of your soul. It's very difficult for families to go through this.
Yeah, no,
Wow.
there's no doubt about it. So let me ask you this, right? Obviously, I can tell. I mean, since Mitch has been gone for quite some time, I'm sure you know you talk about it so well that I know you're comfortable talking about it. But I know it's got to be painful. What I mean, what are some other things that you're doing? You have to be pretty active. I mean, you just seem like it. So, like, what exactly are some things that you're doing that maybe we can help out and get involved with, or maybe get other people involved to kind of get the message out there? And obviously, not only just broadcast Mitch's story, but make it a lesson to be learned for people. Like, are there anything that you're doing, any groups that you're active with right now?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest groups that my husband and I belong to, which I would encourage anyone who's lost um, a a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad. It's called Soul, and it's Soul Surviving Overdose and Understanding Loss. And it's a grief support group for those who have lost a loved one to drugs or alcohol. And Marianne Lemon started this group when her son Ben passed away. And she would go to traditional grieving groups, and it was like, because your son or daughter died, from substances, somehow their death didn't mean as much as someone whose son or daughter died from cancer or a car accident, or, because there were substances involved, like your death wasn't as valuable. And she found that to be painful, and she found that to be stigmatizing. So Soul was born from that. And I tell you what, it's a great group. We go and speak at like Harris House and different treatment centers. At Christmas time, we write letters to people that are in programs and tell them, a little bit about our story and why we're involved with Soul, and that they can make it, they can get healthy, they can change their lives with recovery. So Soul does a lot of really nice things and reaches out to a lot of people in the community. And the biggest part about Soul is that you don't feel alone. You don't feel alone. And there are other families like yours. So I would really encourage anyone who has lost there's siblings, there's sons and daughters, their moms and dads have died of overdose. Obviously there's lots of parents like me, but Soul's a really good group. They're also on Facebook, and yeah, I would encourage that.
Yeah, I
Also go
definitely.
to open NA meetings, go to open AA meetings, listen. If your son or daughter's still alive, listen to people at these meetings speak and talk about what it's like to have this problem. And you're able to understand your loved one better when you hear these people speak. You, once again, you're not in the dark. You have a bird's eye view of what is actually going on through someone else's lens.
Yeah, absolutely. And after this conversation, Lori, I'm going to try to get us in contact again because I'm affiliated with some things as well that I think um, it would be a blessing and a benefit for you to come and speak. To be honest,
Oh, you're so kind.
no, it's no big deal. I mean, I just think that this is just something that it's unfortunate, right? It'd be different if you're the only person in the world that is experiencing this, but I mean, there's thousands of Laurie O'Briens out there, and
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
absolutely devastating that we even need to have this conversation. Normally, if you did any research on our podcast, which I don't care if you did or not, right? But I mean, everybody that we've interviewed prior to this is normally about good things, right? It's normally about
Right.
their awesome life story, about some
Right.
major
Right.
accomplishment or something that they're doing, right? Or something interesting. But this is kind of the different take and swing on things where I think we're at a pivotal point in our lifetime in our nation's country, and or that was poor wording there, but I mean I should say the lifetime of our nation. I should it's better wording. We're at such a pivotal point there that these conversations need to be had because it's going to be too late. And the last thing I want to do is see another Laurie O'Brien have to speak somewhere because another person was lost to something that is 100% preventable, right? Um,
Absolutely.
Kids die of cancer, kids die of car accidents, kids die of accidental things all the time, right? Fentanyl deaths are 110% preventable. It's the number one killer for young Americans, and it's 100% preventable. That's the craziest thing.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
absolutely crazy. I mean, it's so mind-boggling to me that this is not a bigger issue than what it is. And I just want to say, I know we're getting close on time here, so I just wanted to appreciate and say thank you again for coming on and meeting with
Yeah,
Matt and
thank
us,
you so much.
fielding some of our questions and sharing your insights because this is worth more to us than you could even imagine.
Oh, you guys are so kind, and thank you so much. I appreciate you putting this out there, and when someone hopefully hears it that son or daughter is still alive and struggling, they won't feel so much shame and stigma. And for those whose son or daughter may already be dead, maybe they'll reach out through the Soul group and get some added support that they need, because it's we're all connected, and if we can help each other, that's what's life about, helping each other out.
That's what it's all about, helping your better man and woman and making their lives better and so that we all strive and succeed.
Okay.
Well, guys, I'll tell you what, we'll wrap it up here. I don't want to keep everybody too long. Of course, I want everybody to enjoy their Saturday, but um, Laurie, thanks again for coming on. And guys, if you have anybody in your life or you yourself that is struggling with addiction, contact me. We'll get you in contact with Laurie. We'll get you the resource. We'll get you the help, whatever you need. Just don't feel like you're in this alone. There's options. Does that mean that you need to rush and get sober right now? Not necessarily, but I mean, if you have ambitions to face this battle and start, winning this war, contact us. We'll get you in the right direction with people. I mean, we care whether we talk every day or we talk never. I mean, it doesn't matter to us. Matt and I are big
You're not
advocates
alone.
people being happy. So
Yes, you're not alone. Absolutely.
yeah, definitely not, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And if you made it this far, like, subscribe, do whatever you do. Reach out to us with questions. Laurie, thanks again for everything.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So much. Thank you, gentlemen. Good night.
Good night, guys.
Good night.